Welcome back, everybody. It's another episode of the Cadre Concept. I'm your host, Chris Angel, and I'm here with your host, Shane McGraw. Shane, hello.
How do?
I'm just still inspired. I mean, in full transparency, we just ended our last recording, and now we're recording this one. But I'm still inspired. I'm riding on the afterglow of, just your story, man. I'm moved by your story. It's not my story. Like you went through more stuff than I went through it. Not that we have to compare stories, right? But I think sometimes
stories connect us.
I know. And I'm really moved by how you got here and what it is that, like, the Cadre Concept, right, is the fruit of your story. Like, coming out of all of that and now feeling like you went from chapter 1 where it was drifting, right? Chapter 2 was driven and about you, and chapter 3 now is about being directed for something bigger than yourself.
Right.
It always helps to have a frame where we can otherwise it kind of gets really loose when we talk about Jesus or God or our purpose or our big, what's your why? Like, all of that stuff starts to get really loose, and it's hard to orient ourselves into, how do I make this actionable, or how do I apply this to my life? We can't just hold hands and talk about it. Like, I want to do something with it.
Yeah, I think nothing I'm going to tell you from now until forever will be earth shattering. I don't think there's very much that's new. It's just, I'm going to give you my perspective, and maybe you can connect to my story, and then you can plug it into yours. And so I've got some framework. Yeah. Loose framework anyways, but yeah.
Well, and I want to say that, like, that's part of the problem is people keep looking for what's new. Like, it's not about what's new. It's about being able to orient yourself to what's next for you. Like, part of this journey, I feel like, and you tell me if you experience this, but for me, moving through my own chapter 2 of being driven, I was looking outside of myself for a lot of answers. And it wasn't until I started to tune into something higher, right, that I started to get real direction. And I feel like it's not that you're hearing something new. It's just that you listening to this, need something to orient yourself to. And that's why us over here who create frameworks for things, we create them so that you can orient. We don't create them so that you can convert to our thing. We create them so you can orient and find answers for yourself. Is that fair?
Yeah. So what happens is you ever heard of this? It's called when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
Of course. Yeah.
We will learn a lesson 5 or 6 times before we're ready to learn it. And what people don't realize is that doesn't make you suck. It just makes you not ready to learn it. In the 7 F's, one of the perspectives of these 7 F's that I'm about ready to go through is the fact is that they're all a wheel. They have circular manner. They're all equally important. And if one is off, it affects the other. Well, all of us will have some areas that we're just doing really well on. And then we'll have some areas that are sacrificial lambs for doing really, really well in one area that affects the other. Like, you'll see it a lot of times. You'll hear people talk about, like, oh man, I got all this money, but I'm on my 2nd marriage.
Yep.
Well, I don't know about you, but that's not cool with me. I'm not going to get divorced. I already told my wife she can't quit me. It's just not happening. And I'm going to do the work every day to help her not quit me. And then I'm going to call her out too. It's a 2-way street.
Right.
She is my best friend, and she's got to be working on being the best version of herself, and I got to be doing the same. So we need a roadmap. In fact, I want to segue and say that something that I think is really powerful, that's something free you could put together right now. I've done the first time in my life, and I'm addicted to it. And now I'm recognizing that it's even more focus on these 7 F's. So I'll tell you about the 7 F's in a second. But if you had these 7 F's and you knew what they were for you and you knew what you wanted out of them, how well would you be successful? We're in goal planning, right? It's January. Everybody's got their New Year's resolutions, and we pick these goals like lose 50 pounds. But how do you lose 50 pounds in a year? Well, you divide it by 52 weeks and 365 days, and you find out how much pounds you got to lose a day. Right. And then you put in the disciplines into your life. Like, one of my friends, there's all these different fads, right? So one guy might do that. He's on a fasting diet where he doesn't eat till noon, and then he eats at dinner at 5:30, and then he doesn't eat again. No food. And he loves it. His brain is cleared up. And what he's realizing that his fitness is connected to his finances, and his fitness is connected to his faith, and his fitness is connected to all of his other F's.
Yep.
So my thought is what's the number one thing that you need to do and you need to take from this? If there's anything you get from me, it's love your wife and love your kids. Because at the end of the day, the money, the other people, that will come and go, but your family, I would not want to get to the finish line and have everything but the family box checked.
Right. Yeah. It's
I
good.
just wouldn't. I mean, I think it's the most important. Second, for me, my first is faith, and then it goes family, and family is at the top of the heap for me. So, where was I going? I wanted to tell you a story. Oh yeah, couples retreat. So what I did is I was listening to a podcast called The One Thing. It's a great book. If you haven't done it, it's a great concept. I've read it several times. The podcast, I am an audible go on the flow guy. And so I was listening to it and he talked about his couples retreat. And I thought, I'm not going to go to his yet because I'm not ready, but I'm going to create my own. And so I said to my wife, I said, hey, I booked this hotel for 3 days. I got us a spa and we're going to take our bikes. We're going to do some road biking. We're going to do some hiking. I'm going to take care of everything. You just need to show up, but I want you to be open to answering hard questions. That's all. And then I went and I researched and I found like 600 questions and I pared it down and I picked about 7 or 8. And I tried to pick 2 for each categories of my F's and ask hard questions of my beautiful wife who birthed my children. I wanted to ask questions like, you know, when you consider like friends for our kids, what's important to you about their friends? And I wanted to listen and not have an answer. So I was really literally like, I'm going to write notes and I'm sitting at this table writing notes. And what I found is my wife felt cherished. And I think for the first time in my freaking 15-year marriage, she was like, my husband's listening to me.
Wow. Yeah.
So my point is I challenge you all to, whether or not it's I think it's got to be 3 or 4 hours, but what would happen is if you put on the hat, that's my job to make sure that my bride loves me, and you went and you took your wife on a retreat, whether or not it's 4 or 5 hours or it's a, hotel in the middle of nowhere, whatever, but no distractions, no cell phones. And you earnestly seek to understand your bride.
Yeah.
Would she stay with you another year? I'm thinking maybe.
Yeah.
So these 5 F's or 7 F's, I always say 5, so you have to humor me when I mess it up, but I want to tell you what they are and I want to tell you the framework.
Perfect.
So if you picture a wheel and the spokes of this wheel are these 7 F's, and you were to rate yourself from 0 to 10, 0 being the middle of the spoke and 10 being the outer layer. And you were to say, well, in my marriage, I feel like I'm this. So in my faith, I feel like this, finance, fitness. And you were to go on your F's and you were to create this yoke, you would see that it wouldn't be round. You would have a round wheel, but your rating of yourself would be like, great sex life, horrible money life. And there's always a yin and a yang. Right. I've never seen anybody just have a circle. It's always a teardrop or a spokety, looks like a splattered egg or something. So know that before I even say this, that you're not perfect, and this 7 F's is to meet you where you're at. I think when I try to have this image that everybody was fit, and if I'm not fit, I must fall short. That's not the point. The point is your best version of yourself. Joe Stump says every day 1% better than the day before. And I could go on and on about how many people have talked about stop chasing perfection, start chasing the best version of yourself each day. That's what directed is. It's not so much about you. It's thinking of yourself less. It just makes it easier. If you think of other people, you don't have to think of yourself. So here's the 7 F's. So it's faith in this order, family, friends, fitness, finance, fun, and then what's the other F? The work one. Field. So those are the 7 F's. Yeah. And what I would suggest is you immediately stop what you're doing, right? Ask yourself the hard question: what's most important to me in each of these areas? One thing. So, like for instance, if you're looking at me and my family, I want to create a legacy. I want to engineer a family where my kids go on to be better versions of me, better versions of themselves than I was. I want to give them the opportunities of life. I want to launch them in this world to make it better. So how do I do that? Well, now that I know what I want, it's easy to say, well, what are some things that would have to be present in order for me to do that? So I started doing research on this topic, and I ran into the 7 Checkpoints by Andy Stanley. Great book. And it says, these are the 7 irreducible minimums that you want your kids to have when they launch out of your house. So I bought the book and I've been studying it. And that's what I'm going to do this year is I'm going to study that book, 7 Checkpoints for my kids. And that's something that's tangible, practical, realistic. You can listen to it. You can read it. I mean, you can listen to this podcast. Like, you can gain it however you gain it, but you're focusing on how do I create, raise up children that have these 7, non-negotiable pieces. Yeah.
Do you ever feel like with those 7 things, like it feels overwhelming to take all 7 things on, or is it like no big deal? You're like, yeah, 7 things, let's go.
Well, of course it's overwhelming when you want to, when you become directed, you got to give up the idea that life is easy. But when it's hard, it's usually because, and this is my opinion. So I'm 38 years old and 39 years old now. And like I said, I grew up an idiot. So I don't know that I'm necessarily the due north. And so just take my words and see if they fit you.
Mm.
But for me, I'm very tactical. So my brain says to me, I'm very emotional in one state and then I'm very tactical on the other. And I've learned to be tactical because pure emotions without follow through doesn't work. So you have to have both. In order for my strength is that I care about people authentically, but if I don't show up under the appointment on time, they don't feel cared for. So my actions and my emotions have to align. So I became very systematic. That was just a response mechanism. So what I do is I believe that I subscribe. You ever heard of a book called Miracle Morning?
Yeah.
Miracle Morning.
Yep.
So I'm a big fan of it. I don't think it's literary genius by any means. I don't think that he wrote like the best, but he kept it so simple and he just gave you this thing called savers. And you just wake up earlier than you would and you spend time filling up your own cup and working on things. Well, when I want to write a book, I got a 1.8 in high school. I was most likely, they graduated me so that I wouldn't come back.
Yeah.
I'm
Nice.
kidding. I'm not. They were literally like, okay, look, you need to do these 6 things and we're going to help hold your hand,
Yeah.
So what I found is you can't stomach them all, but if you engineer your life to create time to work on them, you'll get better day over day. So I always believe in end capping. Do something in the morning and do something at night.
Yeah, I like that.
The night thing. I'm not great at it, but I'm getting better.
So that's what'd you call it? Capping? Bookending? What'd you call it?
Yep. Bookending. End capping.
End capping. Yeah. I would imagine that's a great way to just start. Look, I think the place where it starts to feel overwhelming is if I'm sevens on my wheel on all 7 areas, 7 on 7s, then for the most part, life feels pretty good. And I've got momentum, I'm in flow and off it goes. But if I'm like a 7 or an 8 in one area and I'm like a 2 in all the others, all of a sudden it's a little overwhelming. It's like, dude, I have a lot of work to do in my life. And I think the end capping can be just an easy place to start with just 1% a day, right? Morning, evening, pick something. Pick the next one thing. You guys go read the book One Thing, but pick the next one thing and go to town on it.
Let me give you like a visual for those of you who are visual like me. So remember, there's 3 types of people: the drifted, the driven, and the directed. All of us fall into this thing. And then what happens, we get layers of growth. Like you can be more driven today than you were yesterday. You could be more directed today than you were the day before. It's a match. You never arrive like this.
Right.
There is no finish line. There's no retirement in the Bible. You just work hard. It's just what it is. So the question is the egg analogy. If you want 0 to 10 and you start out in the middle and you do your thing and you're a big teardrop, well, that's where you're at. So now you have a clear path of where you want to go. And if it's a teardrop, that means one of them is doing really well. Like I did it with a friend recently who's a sweetie pie, and she's a worker, man. That girl can get it done, and that's really high on her list. Well, guess what else is really high on her list? Money. She's got money because she works hard. But then where her family stuff, she feels a little convicted because she'd like to do better there. So now she knows that she could take a little from and put a little from one and put it in the other to try to round out her circle. Then there's some people like you, to your analogy, that are like 7s. And they're just like, everything's good, but I don't think you're supposed to stay uncomfortable. You're supposed to keep growing. It's not about, 1% better. You don't ever get there. So when you're stagnant in your perfect circle, you're either lying to yourself, 1, or B, you need to shake off some dust and try to do some harder things because you got more to do in this world.
All right. I want to ask you this question because it's, I find this comes up a lot. I think when people are, especially probably in the driven season of life, well, especially in drifted and driven, what happens is I think, we see what we see, and so we go get it, right? But then when people ask us, well, what's your why? Or, well, what do you want in this other area of life? This other area of life we've never really considered or given much thought to. I'm like,
I don't know.
I mean, how do we start to find our answer to that? How do we find what we really want?
I have a good response that's, dear to my heart presently. So tell me if you like it. So there's a guy named Andy Andrews, and he writes a lot of books, and he has this thing in the opening line of one of his books that I just love. And he says, the greatest gift you can give yourself is, and I'm paraphrasing, is a question. And then that question, what it does is it either you go out and you seek for wisdom, and then you either gain supporting evidence to validate what you thought, or you gain new information to create a new paradigm. And each way you get to grow. So I think the first thing is asking yourself a question in the area. Go with that. And then allow it naturally to work. I
do love that.
So if you don't feel like you're physically where you are, ask the question, what do I want? It's not very
You know what's
hard. Then you got to think
interesting
about
in
it.
that, dude, is that totally feels like a bridge to being directed. Like the minute you stop trying to go control in your state of drivenness and you start asking the question and being open to an answer, is you're now being open to being directed from something else that wasn't you. And that feels like the gateway into being directed, you know?
Yeah, the student will always have a teacher. So if you never arrive and you're always searching propose a question, I challenge you to this. Think of one wise person you know. Call that person, write that person, email that person, whatever you do, and ask them a question and watch their response.
Mm.
And then take that same list and tell them something. See how it responds.
Mm.
Hey, Kevin, did you know this is the rule of life? Or Kevin, what do you think is the rule of life? Like, you're going to see that people will respond to the student and they will teach you. So if you're always a student, you'll always have a teacher. And in this moment, I don't know if this is a segue you want here, but in this moment, you have to ask yourself, like, what am I doing? And so this podcast right here has one goal. It's to take you from the mindset of being focused on what you can get from the world and give you a mindset of what you can give to the world. Like how do you go out and leave a mark instead of take from? You know, if everybody in our society got up every morning and said, how can I make the world a better place, and did something about it, we'd have a lot less pain and hurt and sadness. And, you know, some of us have our backpacks fully heavy because other people don't have enough in their backpack, right? We're doing the load. So the idea is we want to help you build $1 million network that is worth more than $1 million net worth. That's what the Cadre concept is. But what we found is when you seek to help others, they seek to help you back. And we found that there's a way where you could literally realize that the more you do for others, the more you receive. And I know it sounds cliche, but I can tell you that I've never been really, really good at any one thing except for caring about people. And it's helped me make $1 million. The problem is I cared with conditions. And then I had to learn that. And I had to learn that conditional, doing things with expectations. The thief of joy is comparison. You do something for someone and then expect them to do it back. That is the thief of joy. So the $1 million network, how do you do that? That's what the show is about. It's how do you build $1 million network? Are there some tactical side of things? Yes. You know, there's some hands and some habits. There's some things you need to do consistently. And then there's like the head and the heart. You got to have a goal. You got to know who you are and what you are and why you're doing what you do. And then these two fight. And every single book that's ever been written, every single great speaker has always been trying to help people find the clarity in you know, these two spaces, the head and the heart. So people say, man, you have all the talent, but you have no drive. It's because it's in the head and the heart. Some of the greatest athletes never made it to the football field. They didn't have the heart. They were missing that side of it. So it's a two-part equation, which makes it super hard and makes us all super messy. Welcome, because we're all messy here on this podcast.
It's there's an opportunity for self-awareness here. Like where, you know, you listening to this, like where do you land in those two places? Do you default to the tactical side or do you default to the heart side, and looking for how do you keep counterbalancing or balancing those two? I know for me, I was always the heart guy, always led with the heart. And so results always seemed to trail, right? Because I wasn't willing to, I didn't want to be rejected. It was uncomfortable. It hurt my heart to be rejected. And so I was also always the safe person for people. Like people always felt like they could be transparent and authentic with me. Right. So, there was a lot of life where I was trying, in my driven state in chapter 2 for me, trying to go out and play with different tactics that fit. And it was, you know, I think some of that for people, it's depending on where you fall. For me, it was really a lot of soul searching and the tactics, like what do I have to do? What can I do that feels right for me in tactics? Because I didn't like a lot of what the tactics the world gave me.
Yeah, me and you talk from time to time when you're walking your dog.
Yeah, walking the dog.
Walking the dog, and it's funny. We don't do it on purpose, but it seems to happen. So I'm thankful for it. But one of the things you told me, and I called you the other day, and I wanted to earnestly understand what led you to be you, and I realized I hadn't asked some of those hard questions, and I wanted to understand them because I think it would help me understand you, and then we could be in, we seek for understanding. You always have something to learn. Right. Yeah. So I asked you a question and you gave me an answer, and I'd love for you to share it again if you can put it to words. But
yeah,
the question is what was your moment when, and I didn't say it this way, but when you went from being driven to directed, you started seeing a little bit more clear path, and what was that moment for you, and how did you know, and then how do you stay in that space? Did you have that moment?
Yeah, man, and I think it comes in, there are moments, where you keep leveling up your level of directedness, right? Like there were probably two specific moments. One was, I was a CEO of a real estate company, and I had been there for 5 years, and there was a lot of like politics and corporate stuff happening. And I just went to a class, got some inspiration, some input that was like, what was specifically said was work less, which was an interesting thought at the time, and work inside your unique abilities. And I was like, the work I'm doing right now is not in alignment with my unique abilities. I want to teach and I want to coach. Like I want to pour into people. And this is making me do other stuff that's not
some would
that.
argue that you could do that, right? You have all these people that are underneath you, and you should be able to just, do it where you're planted, right? Why did you feel like you couldn't do it there?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like you try something on long enough and it starts to feel tight. Like as a jacket, you're like, this jacket doesn't fit anymore. And the chrysalis of it, right? Or the shedding of a old skin into a new thing. Like you just know, like, or I just knew. I'm like, I'm an intuitive person. So it was like actually this is good for the second moment too, right? Because for me, being directed, it feels true. Like what comes through the advice, you might read a book and it's not the author, but you've read the book 5 times before, but you read it this time. And the thing you get, you're like, it just cuts you to the core. You're like, this is true,
Oh, well said. That's when I say directed, anybody who's taking this in and they're asking this, what's in this for me? I recognize that if you're going to spend time listening to my podcast, that's time you can't have back. I recognize it. I'm trying to be impactful. I'm trying to provide you some value. So if in this podcast, this one, number two of a podcast, come on.
Yeah, I love it.
I would ask you this question. Are you willing to do the hard work introspectively so that you know what's true for you? Because sometimes I think what happens is your dad says you're ugly, so you grow up thinking you're ugly, but you never tested it. You don't spend the time to find out if you are. And then what I found, I don't know about you, Chris, and maybe you can respond to this, but you know what I think is the most sexy characteristic? People who don't care if you think they're sexy.
Yeah.
The hot girl doesn't. And then here's another thing. I had this mentor and he was telling me something and I thought this was really interesting. And then I want to make one more point. But he said that he's very successful and people assume he always has something going on. So they don't invite him. So he feels lonely a lot. And so I'm doing this little small group and I call him and he's like the most successful man I've ever met. And I hold him up on this huge thing. He's got a marriage of 35 years. His kids are amazing. Like, I just want to be like him when I get older in many ways. And I'm like, well, you want to come to my little group? I know you're 50 or 55 and I'm a kid. And he was like, yeah. And now he's like the first one there and excited. And I didn't think to ask him. And what I learned was he is always willing to lean into people who are on fire and excited about life. That's what keeps him relevant. He could have stopped working forever ago. Right. He works because he likes to help people and he likes to do stuff and make deals, but he leans into people who have fire in their belly. So what's truth to him is people who are going forward. Anybody who's not, he doesn't see him as much. Reticular reactivator, we see what we want to see. Yeah.
That's so good. I love it. Dude, this is going to be an incredible podcast. Not just for everyone listening, but I can't wait. I just feel like good truth comes through every time. So let me end it this way. Like if people want to connect with you, because I know you've got good stuff coming, right? Like that you'll announce later, but you've got good stuff coming. But if people at this stage of the game just want to connect, they want to hear what you're up to, how can they be a part of this, learn more about Cadre Concept, where can they go?
I like long silences. I was thinking about, what do I want from this? Like, what would consider this to be a win for me? We ask that question, what do I want? And then I know how to go get it. Here's what I want. I want to impact people both from the head and the heart space and the hands and the habit space. I want to give you some tools that you can use, that you can go try on. And sometimes it's easier to try on someone else's jersey than to have your own.
Right.
It's easier to get a trainer and show up until you start to love being, you start to develop the habit, and then you can let him go and you can keep going. Right. So I'm a fish and pull guy. I'm not giving you fish here. I'm giving you fish and poles. So if you're going to tune in, you're tuning in to get better and to grow. That's what we're here for. And if you're not doing that, you probably won't come back because you'll find what I'm saying challenges you too much. But if you want to get connected, you know, here's what I'm looking for. I want to put out my signal into the world, and I want to use Chris to help me do this so that I could connect to other people who want to make a difference in their life, their family's life. The 7Fs resonates with them and they want to do something about it. Yep. And then I want to share my story and have you share yours. So I thought I would do this podcast where I would kind of speak to the why, the head and the heart part, and then speak to the other side, which is the habits and the disciplines. Like what are the things that help us take this stuff and put it to motion?
Right.
So if you're going to email me and call me and email me because you want to figure out how to take these two concepts and you want to tell me your story so we can help mold each other.
Yeah.
I want to grow.
Yep.
I'm here for selfish reasons to grow.
Yep.
So if you want to get a hold of me, Shane McGraw is my name. You can look us up. We have a little coaching platform called lprgo.com. You can go there. If you want to email me, it's support@lprgo.com. And if you want to call me, my personal cell phone is 360-620-7119. Let's do life together.
Shane, thanks for a great episode. It was awesome, man. I'll catch you in the next one.
All right.
See ya.